American Francis Tiafoe, the number 22 seed, shocked second-seeded Rafael Nadal in the fourth round of the U.S. Open in front of a raucous crowd at Arthur Ashe Stadium. Nadal was leading 3-1 in the fourth set when Tiafoe won 5 straight games to finish off the upset. The 36-year-old Nadal has won a men's record 22 majors, including taking both the Australian and French Opens this year. Tiafoe advances to the quarterfinals, where he will face the 9th seed Andrei Rublev of Russia. I'm Eric Messersmith, Fox News.
And a shark attack in Hawaii leaves a French woman in critical condition. She'd reportedly been swimming and possibly snorkeling in murky water Saturday off the island of Maui. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Listen to The Point anytime, anywhere on Odyssey. Odyssey is your new audio home for all the music, news, sports, and podcasts that matter to you. Find your favorite stations like The Point and discover more. Music stations, local and trusted news sources, sports talk and team coverage, plus today's biggest podcasts. Find it all on the Odyssey app. AUDACY.
Subway's Eat Fresh, Refresh brings you the sequel to the Sweet Onion Chicken Teriyaki. Enjoy the new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki. Delight your taste buds with tender, juicy steak marinated in the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce and stacked high on toasted artisan Italian bread, topped with American cheese, green peppers, red onions, and drizzled with the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce. The new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki is the height of food craveability. Give in to your cravings at Subway. Eat fresh.
Welcome to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, the only show on talk radio where common sense is a lot more common. Phone lines are now open at 888-TALK. That's 888-8255. And now, The Point proudly brings you Tall Tales with Senator Bob Klitzkie.
A well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Boy, I haven't been able to say that on the air for 3 whole days, Jose.
Forever!
It seemed like forever, but we're back, and we got 4 whole days ahead of us of Tall Tales. I'm going to start out by Zemi-Kotny, which is my bilingual backwards play on words, because Zemi-Kotny means really press the meat, but we turn it around as meet the press. And it's the real version of a show that PMSNBC has tried to put on the air, but they haven't done a very good job of it. And you'll recall I used to read both editorials, Daily News. The Post quit printing editorials. The Daily News might as well have quit putting what they labeled editorials in the paper. So I pick on them every day for one reason or another. Today I'm going to pick on them for, once again, taking something that might be a news story in the life cycle section of the paper and calling it an editorial. Here's the title: Spelling Bee Planning Commences. All local and regional schools encouraged to participate. Boy, that is just so exciting, right? I just couldn't wait to get to the end to see what the call to action was on that, right?
Can you use that in a sentence?
Yeah. Wow.
Can I get the base word?
Yes. A spelling bee. Yeah, I'm not going to waste any time on this. I don't have any problem with kids participating in the spelling bee. However, I have to tell you that spelling bees don't really teach anybody how to spell. Because who gets the most practice? the best speller, the kid that needs it the least. So you let him spell word after word after word, and this poor challenged learner who has not learned how to spell the word cat without using a K, this is the first word, and he goes back to the peanut gallery and just sits there and watches.
But then they go on and get a job in the ad industry.
Or writing for the Daily News, maybe.
Writing
huh?
for the Daily News.
Yeah. Okay, so much for Demi Ikadni. We go now to the card, and of course I start out with systemic racism. I don't have anything on on the stranger. There have not been any Matt Topaznia sightings lately at gatherings of the Monoculus, but I'll keep a sharp eye out for it. First item on the card is Simon versus Clint. Talking about something really important, money. Next item is they versus China. I'm just about ready to take the word they and excerpt it from my own vocabulary. It used to be a perfectly decent, very useful word to use when you're talking about two or more people, not talking to two or more people. If you're talking to two or more people, you use the word we. If you're talking about two or more people, you use the word they. As an example, Jose and Ray work for Choice Broadcasting. They are loyal employees, right? Yeah. But we've taken that word and so perverted it that no one knows exactly what it means anymore. Anyhow, next item on the card is they versus China. Then I've got Jean-Pierre versus vocabulary, standing for the proposition that you really don't have to know anything to be spokesman for the president. Now, the cattiness comes out here when I say you don't have to know anything when you're spokesman for the president. This will enable you to channel exactly what he says, because he doesn't know anything either. The continuing saga of Felix versus Lou, the Carl versus Sam Shinohara, marijuana versus the people. And I, once again, I've been saying the same thing from the very beginning. I'll repeat it. This is a good time to repeat it. Right now, marijuana is a Schedule I narcotic, which means that the national government has determined that there is no useful medical purpose for marijuana. Can't even do any experiments with it. People kept coming forward saying, well, yeah, but it's got beneficial medicinal uses. Well, if that's the case, then my approach would be take it off Schedule I. Let's do some research. And if, in fact, it does have medicinal purposes, we know how to deal with it. We deal with thousands of medicines. We have a Food and Drug Administration that deals with those things. Fine. But then I step back and see what happened here, where the medicinal marijuana was just a stalking horse for recreational marijuana. It was more difficult for people to say, I'm opposed to medicinal marijuana, when you came up with these stories of, well, so-and-so has this, and because he has access to marijuana, he can eat and he can do that. And, it's really merciful. So people thought, well, maybe that's okay. So we passed a law for medicinal marijuana, and then, of course, we found out that we can't even come close to putting medicinal marijuana on the market because we don't have the infrastructure, the testing, and all of the things necessary. Well, then what we'll do is we'll just go with marijuana, and then the folks who need it for medicinal purposes can buy it right along with everybody else. So we tried that, and we again ran into a roadblock. This is more complicated than just writing a law that says, paragraph 1, marijuana is legal. Paragraph 2, severability clause. Paragraph 3, the statute shall be effective upon enactment. All the usual BS, right? So we found out that there's even for recreational, it's much harder than we thought. So then we say, well, what we'll do is just let people grow it at home so they don't, as long as they don't grow too much. So, we had this great big placard that said medicinal marijuana. And these guys are sneaking around, out of sight with their, let's just grow six buds of marijuana at home. And that's exactly where we are now. And then, of course, all of the arguments that came forward, yeah, you guys are just taken in by reefer madness, which was a movie that ran in the 1930s.
I heard about that.
Yeah,
I haven't seen it yet.
I've seen it. I mean, you talk about a straw man. You talk about a Hollywood movie meant to dramatize something, and you just beat the heck out of it and say, "See, there's nothing wrong here." And then the whataboutisms. Well, you think marijuana is bad? What about alcohol? Yeah, marijuana is not as bad as alcohol. Well, when I get to this part of the calendar, you'll find out that marijuana is worse than OxyContin, which is one of the drugs responsible for this opium epidemic that's sweeping through the states and really opened the door for all of the fentanyl deaths. But I'll get to that. That's marijuana versus the people. Then we got the Democrat Party versus democracy. And then a couple of things that have been on the calendar for quite a while that I probably won't get to. Systemic racism. I don't think I need to spend a whole lot more time on that. I'm pretty sure you understand the analogy there, that the rice is really orange, but the narrative says, no, it's red. And the guy who would come along at a fiesta and say, don't call it red rice, call it orange rice, because that's what it is going to get canceled. Just like the guy who comes along and says, no, men cannot get pregnant. I don't care how much of a feminazi you are, that just isn't true. He's going to get canceled. Or the Supreme Court Justice who at her confirmation hearing says, I can't define what a woman is. I am not a biologist. That's where we are now. That's why I keep systemic racism on the calendar. We go on from there to a really important part of the show, the 36-34 part of the show. And I look at the agenda for the Guam Housing and Urban Renewal Authority Board of Commissioners meeting. Now, what in the hell is a Board of Commissioners? God. There's the Guam Urban Housing and Urban Renewal Authority that has 7 commissioners. When they sit together, they are the commission. They are not a board. There is no board of commissioners. Now, if the second line of this notice, if you can't get that right, what are you going to do about the really important stuff?
Never mind.
Yeah. Well, they go all the way down to item 8, and then they say executive session, not telling us what code section or anything else. In other words, when you see that, you think, yeah, maybe they want to do a Section 8 contract like they did with Michael San Nicolas and with Mark Smith, but they don't want anybody to know about it. That's why they're going into executive session. So they'll make the deal, and then they'll come out and put it in the agenda of another meeting in such a way that no one will notice it. Don't do that, you guys. You're just killing your own credibility. And we have the Visitors Bureau who has an item number 4, old business, same old error they keep making. You can't just put old business in your agenda because people want to know what the old business is. And then I come to the so-called Mass Transit Authority. No errors here, but some really revealing information. Old business, item number 6C, Item number 6C, executive manager position, announced to public, proposed ads. Ads will be sent to the Guam Post and the Daily News. In other words, they're looking for an executive manager. You remember Selb about to quit and then blew the whistle on the fart. That's quite a play on words, isn't it?
Whistle the fart. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. Yeah, the whistle. Well, anyhow, there was a whistle and a fart. And you got to explain to us once again, Jose, what the meaning of that acronym, the letters in that acronym are.
Back in February, Sel revealed that he got an email inviting him to be a response team on Facebook that was requested by the Luleångro administration, therefore known as the Facebook Administrative Response Team, or the FART.
So every time anybody puts something up there that doesn't put Lee in a good light, or up until a week or so ago, said complimentary things about Michael San Nicolas, the fart came roaring back, so to speak.
They blow right in.
Yeah, and they kind of put the stink on those folks that had the temerity to say bad things about the administration. Okay, so they're looking for an executive manager because this guy, Richard, the guy that did such a great job at Parks and Rec with the swimming pool. Yeah, he came over to the mass transit. And apparently they're not going to promote, he's the acting manager, they're not going to promote him. Then on item 7, new business, A, travel, vote to action. I, small I, Transform Conference, October 9 through 12, 2022. Proposed action, discuss plans for interim executive manager and GRTA Board of Directors to attend the conference. What in the hell? Can they take a bus? You know, it's classic junketeering. Classic junketeering, and it probably is not a worthwhile undertaking to start with than to send somebody who's on his way out as the executive manager and then to send board members to a conference. Just makes no sense whatsoever. Make a nice trip for them, though, won't it? Every time this comes up, I have to get out my soapbox and tell you this. You cannot have a business plan that relies on people who cannot afford your service as its major source of revenue. And that's where we are with our so-called mass transit system. We've got to help people who don't have cars and don't have any money so they can get to their jobs. Those people don't have any money, so they can't pay real bus fare. And real bus fare has to be enough to cover operating costs and make a dent on fixed costs. Otherwise, what you got is a subsidy, not a service. And that's exactly where we are right now. Now, I would like to see the folks who don't have cars, I'd like to see them have the ability to get to the doctor, their jobs, etc. But rather than support this bureaucracy, this acting executive manager, this junket, and all the money we're wasting, we'd be better off if we allowed some bureaucrat to issue cards, ride cards on a need basis and reimburse folks for cab fare. We'd come out way, way ahead if we did that instead of screwing around with the buses and the infrastructure, et cetera, and probably furnishing rides that we charge $1 for that cost $20 or $30 to put on the road. Now, the only way to have a bus system is to have a real bus system. I've talked about this so often. A real bus system would mean that it would operate in such a manner that people who didn't have to ride it would want to ride it. I've used myself as an example. I live in Jigo. Back in the day when I was working in Agana, if I could have spent 7 minutes walking down to Marine Corps Drive and know that a bus would be along in 15 minutes to take me downtown, and that there would be a shuttle that would get me to my location downtown, I probably would have paid $5 for that, for a round trip, and still come out money ahead from driving down there myself. But that wouldn't have been the reason I did it. The reason I would do it is because I would gain time. I can read when I'm riding on a bus. I can write when I'm riding on a bus. Nowadays, given iPads, laptops, and phones, I can even write when I'm riding on a bus. So if you had a real bus system that would cater to people who would fit that description, that was dependable and reliable, you could furnish rides for the needy folks and not charge them anything, and you'd still come out ahead. But we keep trying to pound this round peg in this square hole. It doesn't work, and it's costing money, but it's going to send some folks to a conference. So I guess it's all right. That would be the thinking. All of you challengers out there who are looking for an issue, take a listen. Yeah, so much for that portion of the agenda.
Are you saying that this board of directors is taking us for a ride?
Exactly. Yeah, and you know that when they'll come back, they'll be wearing those T-shirts that say, GRTA paid for my trip to this convention, and all I got was this T-shirt for their grandchildren, right? Okay, we got Kellis and the mass transit versus Hawaii, and I know what he's going to say, and he's absolutely right. Go ahead, Kellis.
Peace, Judge. How are you?
Doing great, Kellis.
Well, you know, one of the things because when I was going to school in Hawaii, there were no school buses. Everyone, you know, I'm talking about the high school level at least. I'm not sure about the elementary, but I rode the bus. So because I was sitting there thinking about it, what after the school bus drivers drive the kids to school, then they sit around for 4 to 6 hours before they drive them home?
Yeah.
Are they paid for that 4 to 6 hours?
Of course. They've got a nice clubhouse.
Yeah. So I'm saying, like, if we got rid of all, because Gov Guam pays for all the schools to get on the bus. What if they took that money and had made the bus on Guam, and so that a regular route going, and then you know what I'm saying?
I do. I know. I've said
that people can get on it.
I've said the same thing on air many times, Kellis. You know, I used to go to Hawaii on business a lot, and I quit renting a car back in the early 70s because a car is an anchor around your neck in Honolulu, and you can get anywhere you want to go easily on the bus, so you don't need a car.
So, like what I was saying, that the only schools that I remember when I was in Hawaii that had a school bus was the private schools.
Yeah.
So we should do this here.
So my plan is this: we've got the Liberty runs to the bases, we've got all the tourist runs, we've got the school runs, and we ought to have real commuter runs. And we could do a franchise operation to a company, let companies bid on providing that whole service. That way we could make best use of our rolling stock, and we could have a real bus instead of this sinecure that we're providing for the executive managers.
Yeah, I mean, so the thing that we get, like when I was in Hawaii, we, as a student, you got a bus pass, and it was a lot cheaper than buying, 25 cents or 50 cents each time you got on the bus. And then there was the adult passes cost like twice as much as the student passes, but so it's like $12 for the month. You can ride as many buses that you wanted, but this was obviously a while ago. Right now it's probably $50 or more dollars per month to ride the bus. But this is a lot of people will buy the pass and they don't use it very often, but it's a very convenient thing to have on you at all times.
Yeah, it's definitely the way forward.
But
Kellis.
the most important part of it is if you get the buses running and you do the maintenance on the buses, that you can go out and say, I know that the next bus taking me to Agania will be here in half an hour, and half an hour after that I will be downtown Agania.
That's the way it has to run.
I think that's given,
Yeah.
that you can schedule a meeting. I have to be in a meeting at the, PDN building at 9 o'clock. So 8, quarter to 8 o'clock or so, 8:15, I'll go to the bus.
Yeah, like I need to set my watch. Well, I'll catch the bus, then I can set my watch.
Right.
Very good, Kellis. Thank you very much.
Okay, Doc. You have a good day, Judge. Bye.
Okay, and then I got John who wants to talk about mass transit. Go for it, John.
Hi, Bob. Thanks for taking my call.
Sure.
My ears perked up when you guys were talking about problems with the Guam transportation system. But I was wondering if the GRTA ever thought about it's called a micro transit system using an app. This is something that they did in Kansas City. And by using an app on a demand-only basis, they could do ride-hailing, and you could get more direct service, and actually could maybe efficiently use the bus drivers just by demand on an app. And so it rolled out pretty well in Kansas City. I wasn't sure if that was something that they could do here in Guam. I don't know what your thoughts on that were.
Well, to start with, John, everything's up to date in Kansas City. They've gone about as far as they could go.
Right.
They went and built a theater there called the Burley Q. Anyhow, I can never get over the movie Oklahoma. But you're right, and this is the kind of thinking that we need. We could use the app. There's a company called Stroll here. I would maintain that we'd be better off reimbursing bus fare or cab fare or stroll fare than we would operating this boondoggle called mass transit that provides lots of jobs, but it's not doing the job.
Yeah, I don't think it's really efficient.
No, it isn't.
Yeah.
Good idea.
Okay, well, I thought I'd throw that idea out there, but yeah, thanks for taking my call.
Okay, thank you, John. All right, let's head for the first break here.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Does your physical workplace have an impact on the mental outlook of workers, their overall job satisfaction, and their productivity? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about that and what you might want to do about it. It's The Extra Point here on 93.3.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
Are you looking for a new place to hang out with your friends? Let's go along the sidelines at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Located at 154 Iriarty Road, Unit 4 and 5 in Tamuning behind Royal Bigs. Sidelines, a hidden gem with nothing but great things to offer. Great atmosphere, great food, top shelf drinks, and a great team. What are we waiting for? Let the fun begin at Sidelines Bar and Grill. Open daily from 3 p.m. to 2 a.m. See you there.
We now return to Tall Tales with Bob Klitzkie, soaring over the confusion with his superpowers of truth. Call 888-TALK. That's 888-8255.
Yeah, well, I took a peek at Facebook here. Colin Clark chimes in and tells us that The Fart stars Jay Jansen, Nick Santos, Chris Carrillo, Gus Camacho, and multiple fake Facebook accounts. And that's the gang, I guess, the Farts.
That's how you identify them.
Yeah, it's the Farts.
Besides the stench.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I guess they're doing that, hoping they could catch a break. Whatever happened to that snare drum you used to have back there? Yeah. All right. Moving on into the card here. We've got Simon versus Clint. This is pretty interesting because it is about money, and it's about Clint, who never saw anything that the CCU did that he liked. Clint, did you hear about the CCU? No, what did they do wrong now? Now, let the record show that I've been pretty hard on the CCU myself when it comes to open government and sunshine law requests. And I think probably they learned a lot from the process. It was a learning experience for them, and I think they're pretty compliant with those laws now. But aside from that, I'm pretty much a CCU fan because I remember what utilities were like here before 2002 in the pre-CCU days when the governor appointed the boards for both the Power Authority and the Water Authority. But, well, wait a minute, let me go way, way back. We used to have something called the PUAG. P-U-A-G. PUAG. Public Utility Agency Guam. Nobody ever pronounced it PUAG.
No.
And the PUAG 60 years ago ran power, water, and telephone. And you used to get a little yellow card in the mail once a month that would tell you how much you owed for all three of those things. You would take that card to a treasurer's box, give them some money or a check. They would tear off part of that card, stamp it. That would be your receipt, and away you'd go. Pretty efficient, right, Jose?
Like one stop.
Yeah, pretty efficient. But then as we moved along, we found out that in order to have real first-class utilities, you need to be able to borrow money. And in order to be able to borrow money, you have to be able to secure the loans. And you secure a loan with real property, a mortgage, as an example. So the assets that the Power Authority were using were conveyed to the Guam Power Authority, and it was created as an autonomous agency with its own board of directors. Later on, the same thing happened to water, which was renamed the Water Works Authority. They just should have called it the Guam Water Works. That's enough, right? And the same thing happened there. Of course, the telephone company was spun off and sold to a private enterprise. Both power and water borrowed lots of money, which makes a lot of sense. Now, you've heard me say over and over again that what I'm looking for is effective, efficient government operating within the rule of law that provides basic governmental services on at least a break-even basis. Well, when you go in the bond market, you're borrowing money, so that's not break-even. Borrowing money for capital improvements is not only okay, it has to be done that way. Otherwise, if you're going to build a new power plant this year and pay as you go, is it fair for everyone who's paying taxes this year to pay for that power plant when we're going to be using it for the next 40 years? No. It makes more sense to spread the cost out over the life of the capital asset we're acquiring, and that's what we do with bonds. So before the CCU, we had these so-called autonomous boards appointed by the governor, confirmed by the legislature. And for most of those boards, you could hardly see the governor's lips move when board members spoke about issues. In other words, they were nominally independent, but they really weren't. The governor would decide who the managers would be, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And it didn't work at all. It did not work at all. CCU came along. First thing the CCU had to do, they had to deal with Hanum Taki, because the EPA said, mas janiha itauta Guam e Hanum tadzanai taki Hanum. And if you can't give that to them, we're going to come in and fine the hell out of you until you do.
Was it that bad?
It was pretty bad, yeah. There were boil water notices and things like that. So they got that straightened out pretty quickly. And they started working. They worked on that. They worked on power. And you've heard me talk so many times about the load shedding blues. And it was just a fact of life. It wasn't will there be load shedding? It was, what time's it going to be tonight? And it was just horrible. I mean, it just really was awful. And nowadays, on those rare occasions when it happened, people are saying, wow, you mean it was like that all the time? Yeah, every night. And that came to not a screeching halt, but a pretty quick halt once the CCU took over. So I like the CCU. I like the model. You've got 5 people. And so far, we've had people that have had formal education, what I would call men of affairs. Now, I got to define that. Men of affairs. You know, we're always looking for people for boards and commissions who are going to be impartial, but then we're also looking for people for boards and commissions who know something, who know how to do things. I hear a strange noise.
Somebody sounds like they're coughing out there.
Yeah. So, you know, if all we were looking for was impartiality, we could go out and round, if we need 5 impartial people, we could go out and find 5 panhandlers out there in the middle of the road, bring them in. They're not going to tip the scales for anybody. They're not going to do any party system or anything like that. But would they be able to run a multi-million-dollar industry like power and water? No, they wouldn't be able to run anything. On the other hand, you could go out and find guys that sell, you know, that are in the business of selling power generation equipment and put them on the board. Now, no matter how even-handed they appear, it's gonna not look so hot. So there's this dichotomy. We want men of affairs. Men of affairs are people, men and women who have been out in the economy, who've had jobs, who have worked, who know things, who know how to do things, who know how to get things done. Usually they have some formal education. That's what you want on something like this. So they've got 5 men of affairs who could do a lot of really good things, have done a lot of really good things in their lives before they came on the CCU. They're not in it for the money, because I think they get $1,000 a month, which for them is chump change, the kind of money that they could make with half their brains tied behind their back. And they spend enough time on a very complicated discipline to know what's going on. I suspect that for every hour they spend in a meeting, they're probably spending 8 or 9 hours preparing, studying up, knowing what's going on, because you really got to know a lot about the utilities that are your charge if you're on that commission. So I tend to really favor the CCU and the way they're running utilities. Clint has come out and said, well, you know, where's the renewable energy? They were sworn in January, and we're still burning fossil fuel. What the hell is going on here? Don't these guys know anything? Yeah. So here's a story that ran today, or was it yesterday? Yesterday. Guam Power Authority's customers lost millions of dollars in savings because of slow action by the legislature when GPA sought approval to refinance its bond debt, according to Simon Sanchez, a member of the Consolidated Commission on Utilities. Because of the delay, customers lost out on lower interest rates, according to Sanchez, who said customers will save $15 million, but could have saved as much as $25 million. $10 million. Well, we know now that we're living in a time of rising interest rates. We saw a real trough of interest rates there for years, but now they're coming up. So literally, waiting one day you could be faced with higher interest rates. The delay cost ratepayers savings, Sanchez said during the CCU meeting in late August. We need more timely assistance from the legislature if they really want to help ratepayers save money. We could have saved a lot more money. GPA in April refinanced $285.5 million in bonds from 2012 at a lower interest rate of 4.3%, which will save about $10 million per year in bond payments through 2034 and about $15 million on total bond debt through 2044. The CCU, during its monthly meeting in August, approved a resolution required by law which informs lawmakers the savings will be applied to the cost of the new power plant. As the commission discussed the resolution, Commission member Sanchez said customers could have saved more money if Legislative Power Committee Chairman Senator Clint Ridgell, who was so busy with the insular cases that he probably didn't have any time to pay attention here, had acted on the board refinancing bill sooner. The GPA refinancing bill, written by Senator Joe San Augustine, was introduced October 12, 2021. A virtual hearing was held January 2022. Now, that's a long time in between. The Power Committee submitted its report on the bill February 14th, and lawmakers approved it on February 25. When Governor Leanne Guerrero signed the refinancing bill into law on March 10, she stated it was timely and time-sensitive. The window to take advantage of the current market may close in the coming months, and this refinance has the potential to yield lower power bills for our people in the near future as our economy continues to weather the devastating economic impact of the pandemic and my governorship, the governor wrote. That's so tragic. It was so unnecessary. Money left on the table because they couldn't get our oversight chairman to act expeditiously, Sanchez said. In other words, he waited too long to hold a hearing and do his committee report. Ridgell, in response to those concerns, said his committee wanted more information about the proposed refinancing options, including options that would yield the greatest savings on the bond debt. Our committee took time with this measure to properly digest all of the pertinent data, Ridgell said. Now, if you want to play a nasty trick on Senator Clint Ridgell, send him a sunshine for the minutes of every committee meeting where this was discussed. Because I'll let you in on a little secret. Committees never meet. They never meet, except in committee of the whole. They haven't met for years and years and years. So the standing rules say that the committee chairman can exercise all the power of the committee except moving the bills to rules and onto the session floor. So I'll bet you dollars to donuts that committee never met once. Ridgell may have asked. Ridgell may have jabbered. Committee meeting, no. Okay, let's take a short break and we'll come back to Senator Clint Ridgell.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Okay, well, that was a really timely break because during the break, Simon Sanchez dropped the dime on Senator Clint Rigel. I read from a post on Facebook. We asked Senator Rigel to enter the bill on June 21st. He declined. Senator San Augustine then introduced the bill for GPA in October. So from June until October. And then the hearing was delayed 3 months. The option Rigel asked for were available in June 21, but ignored until the hearing in January 22. By then, millions in interest savings were lost. Yeah, thank you very much, Senator Rigel. Yeah, but he made a point. You know, he made a point that the CCU is not the boss of him. By gosh, that's really important. Well, thanks for chiming in. The only saving grace out of this whole exercise is guess who's not coming back in January? Senator Clint Rigel is doing a great service for the people by not running for re-election.
Maybe he couldn't decide and then it became too late.
Yeah, he couldn't decide. He wanted more information, but by the time he got more information, the deadline had passed and he couldn't run for re-election. Thanks a lot for chiming in, Simon. And then Simon says, ironically, I hate this one, this silly thing blocks the screen. Ironically, Rigel voted for 2 Guam refinancings during this same period. There is no difference in the concepts of saving for the refinancing. So he did it twice, but he didn't do it 3 times. In this particular situation, Clint, 2 out of 3 is bad. Yeah. Okay, next item on the card, they versus China. And I got this from a website called Zero Hedge. U.S. base tasked with confronting China ordered to stop using gender pronouns. Boy, that'll get them. The already increasingly woke U.S. military is going even woker, moving closer to adopting preferred pronouns, a trend which has become a fixture of progressive university campuses, according to an internal memo from U.S. Pacific Air Forces, also known as PACAF. Hey, Carl Nelson, are you listening? Carl Borja Nelson, also known as our Carl, also known as the most dangerous man in the room, who feels a responsibility to come out and defend the Air Force, even with his stellar defense. Well, never mind. The Washington Free Beacon this week published a screenshot of a PACAF memo circulated among commanders, which advises a shift to more neutral language especially when writing reports, directives, and daily on-the-job speech. While the order applies to a specific Air Force major command, the instance strongly suggests this is the path all our armed forces branches could soon take in the coming months or years. The partial copy of the internal memo, which was circulated in form of an email past May, says, quote, in accordance with the diverse PACAF priority, we must embrace, promote, and unleash the potential of diversity and inclusion. Now, let's just stop and talk about the military for a moment. Diversity is not a military virtue. The idea in a military organization is uniformity.
GI.
When the sergeant calling cadence says forward march, everyone steps off with his left foot at the same time. There are some folks who can start a little later because they had impoverished childhoods, and some who could start out with their right foot because they wrote with their left hand in school and the teacher always discriminated. That BS just doesn't go in the military. And if you've ever been there, you understand that from the get-go, this is impressed upon you. Now, when you talk about pronouns, I can tell you one branch of the service that banned the use of pronouns altogether. Let's say that Smucker Huckowitz wants to make a head call. In other words, he wants to go to the toilet. Well, he doesn't just say to the drill instructor, Sarge, I'll see, I got to go over here and take a piss. No, that isn't the way it works. He comes to attention and he says, sir, Private Smuckahuck requests permission to speak to the drill instructor. Sir. And drill instructor says, what the hell is it this time, Smuckahuckowitz? Sir, Private Smuckahuckowitz requests permission to make a head call, sir. All right, Smuckahuckowitz, get the hell out of here. You'll be better back in 90 seconds. So you can't use the word I. And if you ever are so reckless as to use the word you when you're speaking to a drill instructor, well, they don't do it anymore, but back in the days, you felt it in the ears. Can't do that anymore. And you would be reminded that a ewe was a female sheep. So the military, all the military branches are about uniformity. Guess what soldiers, sailors, and airmen wear when they're on duty? Do they wear diversity suits? They wear uniforms. And for good reason. This is something we've been working on for thousands of years. Trial and error. The things in the military world, the things that don't work are eliminated rather rapidly because people get killed if they don't do it right. So sooner or later, you figure out, the military figures out the right way to do it, and it ain't diversity. So what kind of a message are we sending to Air Force recruits, even in the Air Force? We're for diversity. So, when it's colors, when the flag is raised in the morning, you're supposed to stand at attention, raise the flag as you are standing at attention, salute the flag as it is brought to the top of the halyard. Diversity, that means you can't slouch around with your hands in your pockets and then take off after colors. Not this guy, though, not PACAF. We embrace, promote, and unleash the potential of diversity and inclusion. The Beacon writes that if it was sent to senior leaders and commanders at Anderson Air Force Base in Guam under Pacific Air Forces. So we got it here too. That's how we made the news here on Zero Edge. I have a service that alerts me every time the word Guam appears in a national news release. So because of this silly memo, it was even sent to the commander of Anderson. And Anderson, of course, is the U.S. base confronting China. From the headline. All right, let's take a short break here. Now, you could be as diverse as you want during the halftime break, but when you hear the 1812 overture, better get back in your chair because we're going to start the show.
Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
The special master gets a go. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. A federal judge appointed by then-President Trump grants his request for an independent review of the documents seized at Mar-a-Lago. But the ruling likely won't be the last.
We have heard from Anthony Coley. He's the chief spokesman for the Department of Justice and Attorney General Merrick Garland. He says DOJ right now is reviewing this order from federal judge Eileen Cannon and will look at the next legal steps in the process. But it's possible DOJ could appeal. That would go to the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals.
Fox's David Spunt. President Biden spent the holiday on the campaign trail, speaking in two swing states, Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, and warning about extremists in the Republican Party.
Extreme MAGA Republicans don't just threaten our personal rights and our economic security. They embrace political violence.
He's still talking a lot about these so-called MAGA Republicans.
These MAGA Republicans in Congress are coming for your Social Security as well.
Democrats hesitating to be seen on the campaign trail with the president. But Democrats are buoyed by recent legislative wins like the CHIPS Act and the climate and tax bill they call the Inflation Reduction Act.
Fox's Peter Ducey. Police in Memphis, Tennessee say they found a body yesterday in the area where Eliza Fletcher was kidnapped Friday, but they have not said if it's the missing mom. And police in Canada say they found one of two men sought for the killing spree on Indigenous land dead. They say it does not appear that Damian Sanderson killed himself.
His body was located outdoors in a heavily grassed area in proximity to a house that was being examined.
Rhonda Blackmore with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. They are still searching for Damian's brother, Miles. America's listening to Fox News.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglona from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Tell me about it, stud.
Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Festival is back on Saturday, October 22nd. We rockin' and rollin' at the Dusatani Guam Resort from 2 to 10 p.m. Bring your friends and come dressed in your best grease costume to win up to $500 in cash and prizes. So bust out those leather jackets and 50-style outfits as we party the night away at Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Fest. Don't be a square. Get your tickets now at craftbeerfestguam.com or cruise on by any 76 Circle K location. Now that's cool, baby.
Opening statements are set for today in the first trial of the murder of 8 members of an Ohio family.
Trial begins today for George Wagner IV, accused of murdering 8 people from one Ohio family in 2016. 8 members of the Roden family were found dead in several mobile homes and a camper, and prosecutors say 4 members of the Wagner family plotted and carried out the killings of the Rodens in order to get custody of a then 2-year-old girl. Wagner's mother and younger brother Edward have pleaded guilty to their roles in the killings, and George Wagner's father, George Wagner III, is expected to stand trial at a later date. Wagner faces the death penalty if convicted. Tanya J. Powers, Fox News.
Britain gets a new prime minister today. Liz Truss will become the country's third female prime minister after she travels to Scotland to meet with Queen Elizabeth, who is staying at Balmoral Castle. A new special takes a closer look at Michael Jackson's death.
TMZ investigates who really killed Michael Jackson. Premieres on Fox Tuesday night at 8. The special explores the King of Pop's addictions and his final months and dives into Dr. Conrad Murray's conviction for Michael Jackson's death and the expansive universe of perpetrators who contributed to his substance abuse. Orlando Martinez is one of the detectives.
There's a lot of folks to blame that have never had a reckoning.
The special also includes a never-before-seen interview with Michael Jackson's ex, Debbie Rowe. Michelle Polino, Fox News.
The Japanese government's urging its young people to get drunk for their country. Officials have launched a campaign called Sake Viva to lure more young people into buying booze so the debt-ridden country can reap the tax revenue from liquor sales. And Wall Street reopens this morning after being closed for the Labor Day holiday. Dow futures up 124 points. I'm Carmen Roberts, and this is Fox News.
Come try Guam's original Chamorro restaurant with Pica's Best 5 years running. Mezcla Chamorro Fusion Bistro. Experience Chef Peter's candied salmon over scallion coconut rice, octopus to naktak, Chamorro platter, and their award-winning gourmet hamburgers. Or if you're looking for something healthy, try their keto-friendly menu. Come and enjoy Mezcla's half-a-day service at their Hagåtña and Grand Plaza Tumon location. Call their Hagåtña location at 479-2652 for reservations.
Gas is expensive, so let the bank come to you. Through our remote deposit capture, you can deposit your checks into your account from your phone. And with our Dynamite Bank Pacific Visa debit card, you can use your money anytime, anywhere. It's the perfect combo.
Now we're banking on the future services to choose. Bank Pacific, where others put branches, we place roots.
Equal housing lender. Member FDIC. Crank it up.
Subway's Eat Fresh Refresh brings you the sequel to the Sweet Onion Chicken Teriyaki. Enjoy the new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki. Delight your taste buds with tender, juicy steak marinated in the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce and stacked high on toasted artisan Italian bread, topped with American cheese, green peppers, red onions, and drizzled with the tangy new Sweet Onion Teriyaki sauce. The new Sweet Onion Steak Teriyaki is the height of food craveability. Give in to your cravings at Subway. Eat fresh.
So here we go, back for the second half of Tall Tales after Jose did another superb job of coordinating that halftime show like he does every day, running the Rogues Gallery. I noticed a picture of pretty Sarita Guerin and her kids. Boy, we're lucky we can put that up for nothing, Jose. That's a very valuable photo.
We got a good deal with this group of rogues.
Absolutely. Okay, so I'm continuing on here, beating up on the Air Force, apparently not understanding that diversity is not anybody's strength in the military. I don't think it's anybody's strength anywhere. We talk about this on the show a lot. The only country that I know that had any kind of ethnic diversity that made it work was Switzerland, where they've got Germans, French, Italians, and a small group called Romanche, and they seem to get along pretty well over there in Switzerland. But you take a country like Belgium Flemish and Walloons, which means Dutch and French, they're always kind of at each other's throats. And throughout history, when you have that kind of a lash-up, Cyprus, the Greeks and the Cypriots, Istanbul, formerly Constantinople, the Turks and the Greeks, etc. Diversity usually doesn't bring about a whole lot of strength. The one real exception to that, as far as I want to put my finger on it, has been the country that we're living in right now, the United States of America. The national motto of this country, e pluribus unum, from many one. People literally from all over the world came to the United States, and when they got to the United States, they became Americans. We used to be proud of the fact that America was a melting pot until we got into identity politics. Now we see this as a horrible thing. The fact that this country had the ability to take people from anywhere and turn them into a unified people. You know, we always say, we used to say, well, the advantage that we have over China is this. China can't take a carload of Americans and turn them into Chinese. But we can take a carload of Chinese and turn them into Americans. That's been the strength of this country. And the strength of this country wasn't based on race, religion, language, or anything else. It was based on a devotion to an ideal, the rule of law, freedom, individual rights. And now, of course, for the last 20 years, we've had a large number of people in the United States trying to tear this all apart, and they've been too successful. I've plotted out the history for you, going all the way back to 1922, so it's not a surprise. And, of course, these are not isolated events. The woke Air Force is not an isolated event. It's part of a much larger pattern that was worked out by the Frankfurt School in 1922 and refined by Antonio Gramsci in the 30s. And we're seeing it all come to pass now. Going on back to this article here, here's the memo. In accordance with diverse PACAF priority, we must embrace, promote, and unleash the potential of diversity and inclusion. Competition against near-peer adversaries requires a united focus from the command. Whoa! The joint team and our international partners, welcoming and employing varied perspectives from a foundation of mutual respect, will improve our interoperability, efficiency, creativity, and lethality. Do not use pronouns, age, race, etc. Do not use pronouns. Unauthorized examples. He, she, did. Smuckahukowitz checked into the company yesterday. He unpacked his gear and went straight to the shop. You can't say that. You can't
say that anymore.
No, you can't say that. Unauthorized examples. He's the best male in the group. She's the best female in the group. Can't do that anymore. Youngest and oldest. Sergeant Murray. Sergeant Murray, in the face of great adversity, gathered the troops, pulled them all together, and it showed extreme leadership. If it weren't for Sergeant Murray, our mission would have never been accomplished. You can't say that. You can't say Sergeant Murray. Sergeant. Authorized examples. This sergeant. This NCO. This member. You know, there was a while when the Army was discouraging the use of the term soldier. They preferred service member. Service member sounds like somebody who works for the post office, you know. Soldier, that's a worthwhile title. If you are a soldier, be proud of being a soldier. And soldier is also a verb. You know, when Marines go out into the field, people in the same unit will soldier together. But we want to tear this all apart, all in the name of inclusion, equity, diversity. The Department of Defense has already for years mandated that classes be given to all enlisted and officer personnel regarding LGBTQ plus sensitivity training. And more recently, there's been a move to provide greater accessibility to gender transition surgery, all at the taxpayer's expense, of course. Just how does the gender-neutral language directive pushed by PACAF leadership could possibly improve lethality is unclear and left unexplained in the content published by the Beacon. Real military recruitment ads, China versus Russia versus USA. Yeah, you know, the Marine Corps definition of what it is that Marines do. Marines break things and kill people. There's no way of putting a sugar coating on that. They're not, well, you know, they're even trying to screw up the Marine Corps. Okay, I probably got somebody from PACAF online telling me to watch my pronouns. I've got Mark Cruz, who wants to make his mark, and one guy who occasionally has to repeat, but a lot of times he's so direct he needn't repeat. So let's let this caller make your mark, sir.
Hey, Bob.
Sir.
So now I'm confused because the ranks in the list, the early enlisted ranks are all airmen, senior airmen, airmen first class.
Uh-huh.
They didn't change any of that.
Uh-huh. Well, they're going to have to change it to air person.
Air person.
Air person first class, right?
Yeah, senior air person.
Or perhaps Air 1. O-N-E. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, yeah, I'm kind of confused because my daughter's in airman first class.
Whoa. Well, you know, it's your daughter, so I wouldn't even I wouldn't go there. But you know what we're talking about now at the last part of that article is about a gender correction at the public expense.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, and it's so funny because everybody makes jokes about the Air Force and you know how you know when they go on bivouacs, the Air Force is, you know, the Marines are in the mud and the Army's in their nice comfortable tents, and the Air Force checked into the hotel.
Checked into a B&B. Yeah, they're roughing it. They checked into a B&B instead of a hotel.
Oh, instead of a 5-star hotel. Yep. Yeah. All right, Bob. You have a good rest of your day.
Thanks for calling, Mark. All right, let's see what Repeat wants to tell us about the woke USA. And Pete, by the way, is a soldier. So go for it, Pete.
I won't repeat his remarks.
Okay.
We did have to capitalize soldier once upon a time in the Army writing. So there's a regulation for Army writing. There's a regulation in the Army for everything, for chewing gum, for wiping your derriere.
I was told, Pete, that there's even a regulation of how to maintain a mule.
Yes, there is, absolutely. But I wanted to ask, you know, what is the only thing smarter than a Marine biologist? An Air Force biologist.
Of course.
But regards to the wokeism, I know quite a few folks who, while I was serving active duty, got out because of the trend that was happening. They didn't want to be a part of it anymore. The military exists to provide a defense to our country. And in order to provide a defense for our country, they have to be lethal. And the discussion amongst a lot of my friends was that we were becoming a welfare group, you know, worried more about things like entertainment and wiping everybody's nose for them instead of teaching them how to kill, which is what the military exists to do. And so we're being looked at by other militaries in other countries. You know, the Israeli military is really the model for the rest of the world to look at. I mean, yeah, sure, we have all the equipment and all the technology, but when you look at the ethos, the Israelis get it right. You know what I'm saying? And then the Russians probably behind that.
True enough, Pete.
Yeah, so I just wanted to throw that out there that, you know, even within the ranks, it's getting unbearable for folks because they joined the military to be a defender of our country, and they ended up being social workers.
And everything I see online is that all of the services are having a real hard time recruiting soldiers. And that's probably the reason why, recruiting people.
Right. And, you know, it's ridiculous. We have manpower documents because we need to know the manpower strength as opposed to our equipment, as opposed to our horsepower that we have, because we still have horses. So, you know, all this political correctness is just getting in the way of the mission. It's blurring the mission. The mission is to be able to deliver lethality in the defense of our country when needed.
Well, I think there probably is a small group of people inside the armed forces that don't see this as taking away from the mission. I think they see it as the mission. To destroy the fighting capability of our armed forces.
It's a shame because just like Neil Weir, right? His intentions may be good, but it's going to end up being what kills us.
Who is Neil Weir?
He's this weird guy that kneels down in front of everybody.
You mean Knievel Weird? Oh, okay, I got it. Yeah.
Evil Knievel.
All right. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Uncle Bob, for letting me chime in.
Good talking to you, Pete. Yeah. Well, Pete's got it. You know, we've ruined so many things here, and just in my lifetime. And it seems that there's a movement to ruin everything. That the United States will become from instead of a land of plenty to a land of scarcity, that will be a pushover for any country that wants to take us on. I've mentioned this before. If you drive from Casa Grande, Arizona to Gila Bend, Arizona, you'll see signs on the south side of I-10 that say, caution, do not come over here. I'm paraphrasing. Caution, danger area. Do not cross into this area because there are bandits and drug smugglers, etc. And it's thousands of square miles that we have basically ceded to the outlaws of a foreign country. You know, we don't exert American authority in that area between Route 10 and the Mexican border. And of course, our president never saw an illegal immigrant he didn't like. Bring them all over, let them stay.
It's gone from can't to won't.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So, and you know who gets hurt the most by this? Folks of Mexican ancestry living in the Southwest. Because there's so many people running around that don't belong in the country, the finger of suspicion points to everybody who looks, sounds, acts like a Mexican, even though they may have been in this country for years and years and years. So it's just a horrible thing that he's done, or one of the many horrible things that he's done to our country. And he's really just a stalking horse for a much larger movement. The world government folks, the wokesters, Black Lives Matter, they're all part of that same cabal. They're all moving in the same direction to destroy our country.
This is a great red flag to the career politician that wasn't meant to be a career position, because he's been in this position in Washington since the 70s, late 60s.
Yeah, since he was 25.
And you know, it's not just nationally, it's locally too.
Yeah, well, he was elected to the Senate and he was 25 years
I'm talking
old.
about that career politician-minded mindset that has an entitlement position that nothing changes.
Yeah. Yeah, you hang around it long enough and it's bound to get to you. That's why, and of course, at the beginning, the reason we had elections in November was because the crops were in. Farmers could come and vote. The reason we swore the president in January, same reason, right? The reason that Congress came into session in the fall, same reason. These were not meant to be full-time jobs. You go to the Congress in the fall, you sit there, you stay there for a month and a half, you do what you need to do, and you go home. Not anymore. Well, now you wait until Thursday night and you go home. You wait till Monday night and you come back. Yeah, and it's turned into something that the founding fathers wouldn't recognize. All right, let's head for Chicago in the seventh inning stretch.
The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts of Guam Training every morning on The Ray Gibson Show.
Does your physical workplace have an impact on the mental outlook of workers, their overall job satisfaction, and their productivity? I'm Jerry Roberts, and at 7:20 a.m. on The Ray Gibson Show, we'll talk about that and what you might want to do about it. It's The Extra Point here on 93.3.
You can find daily transcripts of The Extra Point by Jerry Roberts at guamtraining.com. Tune in every weekday morning at 7:20 for The Extra Point with Jerry Roberts on The Ray Gibson Show on 93.3 The Point.
Choice Broadcasting introduces their unbeatable lineup of morning show.
Hands down winners of Guam's morning radio battle.
Daryl Lizama grooves his way through Boss 104 playing Guam's favorite classic hits.
Morning Mouth Ray Gibson shakes the cage on 93.3 The Point.
And now, we are proud to announce the Morning Blender with Kyle Mandapat, mixing it up at sunrise on Star 101.
If you're an advertiser trying to reach the most valuable ears, we've got the shows that listeners have been tuning into for decades.
One call gets all three.
671-888-7346. That's 888-REIO.
Okay, next we go to Karine Jean-Pierre versus Vocabulary. Vocabulary is winning. This is from Tom Woods, who's a pretty good conservative writer. A lot of the stuff that he writes is advertisement, but it's pretty good. And this is what he said. The most obvious feature of White House Press Secretary Karine Jean-Pierre is that she is woefully over her head. She is surely one of the least impressive people in the entire Washington machine. And that's saying something. Well, she warned everyone the other day about extremism. Or is it pronounced extremism? I don't know. I like extremism. What is extremism, you ask? I'm going to stop briefly here and go back to the 1964 election. Barry Goldwater, a Goldwater conservative, as it were, running against LBJ. And one of the things that Goldwater said on the campaign trail was this: extremism in defense of liberty is no vice, it's a virtue. And the left really trimmed him on that. Like, you shouldn't be extreme about anything. So what is extremism, you ask? Jean-Pierre gave us a deeply thoughtful answer. reflecting profound learning and extensive familiarity with the great political thinkers of the Western tradition. Ha ha, just kidding. Tom says, when you're not, quote, when you are not with what majority of Americans are, then you know that is extreme. That is an extreme way of thinking. So if you're in the minority, that's extremism. By this definition, the following groups constitute extremists: jazz lovers, vegans, carnivores, comic book aficionados.
What?
Classical musicians. Well, as Tom is saying, if you're not with the majority, like these guys, jazz lovers are not the majority. They've always been over there in the minority, right? Jazz lovers, vegans are not the majority. And he says carnivores, which probably are the majority. Comic book aficionados, classic musicians. In other words, he's saying these are extremists, according to Corrine. Let's be charitable and say she's referring only to political ideas in her definition of extremism. Then outright socialists would be extremists too. And yet I rather doubt that the Biden White House is going to caution us about those. Guys like AOC and the Burn, they must be extremists. And you know who qualifies as extremists under this definition? The entire woke apparatus. Talk about being opposed to what the majority of Americans think. Whole woke project continues at all only because through browbeating and intimidation, if anything like a majority of Americans bought into its deranged premises, there would be no need for the constant social pressure and propaganda. Again, I rather doubt we'll be lectured to about the dangers posed by this radical minority that favors a complete overhaul of the Western legal tradition and customary social norms in the name of critical race theory and transgenderism. They can't be extremists, no. No, the people we're supposed to worry about are those who generally mind their own business, but whose unforgivable crime is believing the same things virtually everyone on earth believed until about 6 years ago. Not to mention, extremism is an empty concept. Extremely what, exactly? I'm extremely in favor of sound money, peace and property rights, among other things. I'm extremely in favor of them because I am convinced that any reasonable standard of justice and morality requires it of me. How does this make me a dangerous person? Dangerous to the regime, maybe, but not dangerous in any normal person's sense of the word. Meanwhile, they're extremely in favor of monetary inflation, racial quotas, and centralized power. The problem isn't the extreme part. The problem is the bad principles themselves. Nobody gets upset if you're an extremely generous person or extremely honest. Extremism, then, is a low IQ word that sinister people use to demonize principled opponents. If you disagree with what I stand for, state the source of your disagreement. Don't tell me I'm extreme. It's obvious that the regime is trying to expand the definition of extremist to the point where it includes huge swaths of the American population, including you, dear reader. If you don't go along with the narrative, you too can be an extremist.
And this fits well with the Red speech that happened right before the weekend.
Absolutely.
Now, my theory is that the Democratic Party obviously don't want Joe Biden to run again.
Mm-hmm.
So they're going to put him up in such a awful buffoonery type background like they did, because there's nobody in their right mind put that together and said, this is going to work. This is going to unify the country. Because it was just so incredibly hilarious. It's almost like a satire, and he didn't even notice it.
So Susan Rice came into the cloakroom at the White House just before the speech and said, "This ain't your night, Joe. We're going for the price on Wilson."
There you go. This is crazy.
We're gonna throw the fight. Yeah, we're gonna throw the fight. So every Democrat will say, "Yeah, we got to find somebody other than Joe." But you know, if you're down to the end of the lineup and your worst batter comes to the plate and you take him out and you send in a pinch hitter, is he going to be better or worse? They all come from the same place, of course.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that's an interesting theory, Jose, that the Democrats are deliberately sabotaging Joe Biden.
They just don't know what the next step is. They're just working on reactionary, it seems. I don't know. Because there's no way that anybody can look at that and say, this is going to be great optics, guys. Can't wait.
Okay, here's a column from the Daily News. Peter Onodera versus Tall Tales. And it's a letter to the editor, Chamorro language lacking in campaign ads. Only one campaign ad showed a former senator endorsing a gubernatorial candidate in his language. Now, I know what he's trying to say, but, I suspect a lot of former senators endorsed a lot of candidates in a candidate in his language. What's Felix Camacho's language? English. So if a candidate stands up, Sam Mabini stands up and said, "I'm voting for Felix and I want you to also," oh, that's not right because, well, yeah, but it is his language. Yeah. Only one campaign ad showed a former senator endorsing a gubernatorial candidate in his language. There was nothing from senatorial candidates in both parties, the congressional delegate position, attorney general, and on to the gubernatorial candidates. The last gubernatorial candidates who spoke and addressed constituents in the Chamorro language that also included ads were Governor Carl T.C. Gutierrez, followed by his wife, Jerry Gutierrez, who also ran. Remember that? When Carl was term limited? Both have endorsed and encouraged the use of Chamorro in their campaigns, and now three who ran for this primary, not one included a word of Chamorro in their advertisements. Because I didn't follow the rhetoric and rallies and whatever pocket meetings there were, I doubt very much if Chamorro was at work other than the customary half a day. I was somewhat dismayed that former Gutierrez had flowing praises for the incumbent, but he muttered nothing in Chamorro. Shenya na malefa si Senador Onodera Itzoko campaign anay 2002 jan anay 2004 lokwe sa usa fino Chamorro gi dosna campaign. Yeah. But you're low Democrat si Senator Onodera so tisinya ha hali epat ekongok Itzoko campaign. Yeah, he just, he's generalizing there, speaking from the cuff without really knowing what he's talking about. Is this a sign of things to come? Is this coming in to the indigenous language of Guam, which has been touted as official, and yet lip service has been the only thing that has come about this year thus far? And will this be the trend in upcoming years, this 21st century? I'll answer that for you. Unless you champions of Fino Chamorro get off your asses and go to work, the answer is going to be yes. Having a huge government bureaucracy and pandering to the separatists isn't going to do it. I've explained more than once on the air how to go about doing it. I suspect people say, Klitzkie tomorrow. But language acquisition is not something that comes to you naturally because your mother tongue is Chamorro. And until people get serious about this, Onodera is calling it. It was in the late 90s when I heard someone say in Chamorro conference that the end is near when our language, the language of the Marianas, is destined to disappear within 50 years. It's a stark reality that's happening in our midst. And what's sad is that a move is now being made to revert village names to what the Commission on Chamorro Language and Teaching the Culture and History of Territory is part of their mandate, which is a complete waste of time. Yet the administration for which this commission falls under doesn't seem to give a whole idea, a nod of agreement and endorsement, and no one has thought that the Guam Place Name Commission is now a thing of the past. True enough. I also recall a time during Chamorro Month when the legislature attempted to conduct themselves in the usage of Chamorro language in a session. That attempt induced mockery and laughter. That was a joke put on by many of the elected leaders who knew nothing aside from the cuss words, lanya, and the proverbial greeting of the people. Who's kidding whom? Is Chamorro language now a thing of the past, or should we wait for another celebration of Chamorro Month to come about when full-page ads and articles of Chamorro immersion come about? I dare that candidates for general election show some respect to the Chamorro language. Well, you got nobody to blame but yourself, Peter Onodera. All right, I probably got Peter Onodera on the phone.
Just real quick before you get to the caller, Bob. Yeah. I had overheard an interesting conversation. I'm trying to remember where it was. Somebody was talking about being on Saipan, and someone remarked how it was interesting that a lot of the kids up there are speaking Chamorro, and they're like, no, actually, it's coming less and less Chamorro, and they understand it, but they're not speaking it, and they're definitely not writing it. So it's more than just the candidates not using it. There's a mindset, and probably because there's a function that's not being met with the Chamorro language right now, and that may be where they need to find out. Do some soul searching.
You know, if you really go back and look, the Spanish ran the island for 300 years, and almost every place the Spanish went, people speak Spanish. That's the major language, right? Somehow the Chamorros were able to hang on here and survive that whole Spanish occupation. And the entire period of American martial law up until the Japanese came along. The Japanese took kids and taught them Japanese and discouraged speaking Chamorro. But Chamorro survived right up until the Organic Act. And somewhere in the 60s, it all started to get away. My analysis is this. The reason that people don't speak Chamorro now is because they don't want to. That's the only reason.
You can't blame the United States forbidding it up in the CNMI.
No.
And they're not speaking it up there anymore.
No. And, you know, so many people figure that having a good excuse is enough. Well, you know, my parents always wanted me to learn English. They never taught me Chamorro. Or my parents were punished for speaking Chamorro in school, so I never learned it, etc. Now, there are some people who have learned it, not from their mothers, because I always point out that I never learned English. I never had to. I got it for nothing. It's my mother tongue. In the same way, for native speakers, Chamorro, they never learned Chamorro. It's their mother tongue. Michael Bavacqua learned Chamorro as an adult. That's really saying something. And there are a few others. Robert Underwood wrote a column about the hand. Bill Fitzgerald, Bavacqua. He wrote a column about a guy named Cooper, about the handful of people who could carry on a conversation in Chamorro who learned it as adults. happy to say I was in that list. Yeah. But the reason that I could learn it is because I wanted to. If you don't want to learn it, you're not going to learn it. And nobody wants to learn it. That's the point. And there's no easy way to go about it. Now, maybe after the break, I'll go through my method one more time. But I got Tom Poole waiting on the line, wondering if he's ever going to get to talk about the red speech. And you will, Tom. I'm going to look for you in the grandstand at Churchill Downs.
Half a day. This is Clara Manglania from Security Title. A power of attorney can be a useful tool in a real estate transaction, but if abused, it can result in devastating loss. Choosing your representative should be done with the utmost care and should be very specific about the powers being granted. To mitigate loss, the team at Security Title confirms with the owner prior to using a power of attorney to sell the property. Each transaction is unique. Let the professionals at Security Title use our experience to facilitate a secure closing. We are here to help.
Tell me about it, stud.
Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Festival is back on Saturday, October 22nd. We rockin' and rollin' at the Dusatani Quam Resort from 2 to 10 p.m. Bring your friends and come dressed in your best grease costume to win up to $500 in cash and prizes. So bust out those leather jackets and 50-style outfits as we party the night away at Circle K's Craft Beer and Whiskey Fest. Don't be a square. Get your tickets now at craftbeerfestguam.com or cruise on by any 76 Circle K location. Now that's cool, baby.
Okay, so here we are, another great halftime show from Jose. We didn't sell any T-shirts during the halftime show, did we, Jose? We did, huh? A couple? All right, good. Yeah, remember, if you want to buy a T-shirt, just go to thepoint.gu, look for the beard, click on the link under the beard. You can buy a T-shirt there. The beard you got to do on your own. Okay, I've got Tom Poole who wants to talk about the red speech. We always welcome Tom Poole to our show because he's always right on target. Go for it, Tom.
Well, thank you, Judge. No, I was just really kind of relieved to hear Jose's comment. I'm always impressed with how bright and well-educated Jose is, but I've read a lot about that speech, a lot of, columnists and national writers, and no one suggested what I just heard Jose suggest, that because I have been really troubled by that speech because it was so bizarre, and of course I knew that I had as much to do with crafting that speech as Joe Biden did, but it worried me that there were people in charge of things that actually thought that was a good idea. I just, that level of idiocy I found really worrisome. But now I really think Jose, he had to have it. That has to be the explanation, because it was just so cartoonish that it can't be anything else. I think Jose is exactly right. And I wonder, have you heard anybody else conclude that? Is that original from Jose?
Jose is a very original fellow, I'll tell you that. He's a real thinking machine in there behind the glass.
Well, I just think that's the perfect explanation. It was just completely bizarre. There was, as many have pointed out, so many Nazi overtones to that it just couldn't have been accidental. And who would knowingly, willingly do that? And yet Jose's explanation is the perfect explanation. I guess we don't know whether it's correct or not, but I'm actually more comfortable with that than imagining that there's that many people that thought that was a good plan. It has to be that they're trying to torpedo Biden's chances. I just think nothing else makes sense.
Yeah, well, Jose.
Well, it's in between the rhetoric of how dare he say these things, because I fell for that initially, and the rhetoric of he's actually saying the things that I want to hear from the leftist media. And I'm like, it's probably more simple than that. They don't want him there anymore. They don't know how to get rid of him. The best way is to make him look like more of a fool than he already is.
Exactly. It has to be right. It just has to be right. I'm sure these people are, even though maybe I disagree profoundly with how they want to run the country, but they just can't be that stupid to think that, let's get him up and have him do his best Hitler impression and see how that goes over. It has to be exactly what Jose's saying. I think anyway. Anyway, I'm just relieved to have heard that. I feel better. I'll sleep better at night knowing that the people aren't that crazy.
Well, the secret to a good night's sleep every night is to wind up your day at 1800 with the end of Tall Tales, Tom.
All right, Judge. Thank you for the time.
Good talking to you. And it's our friend Tom Poole, a veterinarian, formerly the territorial veterinarian.
You can call in any time to let it get to my head.
Yeah. Okay, so Fino tomorrow, right? We had a problem back in the 60s when I first got here. We thought that if you were going to learn one language, well, let's put it this way, that there was language interference. If you wanted to learn English, you should speak only English, because speaking some other language would make it harder for you to learn English. Research has shown that that is not true. And if you've ever been to Europe, you could see that demonstrated every day, where people say, we were on a cruise ship in the Mediterranean and went to the entertainment every night. And the announcer would go from French to Spanish to Italian to Portuguese, just like that, no matter what. And of course, if you study it, kids that grow up in bilingual households where let's say they're the immigrants, as you were the grandparents, are immigrants and don't speak English. They speak the language of the mother country, and the parents speak English. And when the kids grow up, they don't realize that they're learning two languages. They just know that they talk to grandma a little differently than they talk to mom. They don't understand that when they're speaking to grandma, they speak Spanish, and when they're speaking to mom, they speak English. That just isn't how language works. Language is not an intellectual pursuit. Speaking a language, it's the learning of a system of habits. So that once you've internalized a language, you don't have to stop. If you see someone who's going to step out in traffic, you don't have to go through a phrase book, figure out, oh, gee, I need to tell that person, oh, look out. It's a system of habits. So the way for people to learn languages is to develop that system of habits. Real easy when you're young. Up until you're 11 or 12, kids pick up languages really, really easily. When you get older than that, you're too smart. And you got to be able to figure everything out, which is not the way to do it. You just let it sweep over you, and you go with it. You don't try to figure out, well, this time I said that, this time he said this, and that time what's the difference? You don't do that. So taking that all into consideration, what I think we need is, I'm going to call them Chamorro marshals. We need 50 Chamorro marshals here on the island. And a Chamorro marshal would be a mature person whose mother tongue is Fino Chamorro. He's a native speaker of Chamorro. And you put him into a little learning academy where he learns the fundamentals of language acquisition. And the way to teach someone else a language is you say something, the other guy repeats it. Say, repeat, always working on pronunciation as you go. And as you get a little bit more sophisticated, then you introduce other things. So you start out by something. I'll give a short lesson here. You have to imagine that I'm pointing at you. And I start out by saying, Guahu si Bob. Repeat. And I go like this with my hand. And anybody looking at the hand probably figures, I'm supposed to say that. So let's try it, Jose. Guahu si Bob.
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 Pues mal de que no. Pues now, Be ufaisen hagu ne hadzina anhu. Repeat it. Hadzina anmu.
Hadzi e namu.
Hadzina anmu.
Hadzi at anamu.
Hadzina anmu.
Hadzi na amu.
Anmu.
Amu.
Anmu.
Anmu.
Ajá. Hadzina anmu.
Hadzi na anmu.
Okay. Pues hadzina anhu.
Hadzi an.
Hadzina anhu.
Hadzi na anhu.
Yeah. Hadzina anhu.
Hadzi ananhu.
Hadzina anhu.
Na anhu. Hadzi ananhu.
Na anhu.
Na anhu.
Hadzina anhu.
Hadzi ananhu.
Hadzina anhu.
Na anhu.
Hadzina anhu.
Hold on, I'm untying my tongue. Hadzi ananhu.
Hadzina anmu.
Na anhu.
Hadzina anhu.
Hadzi ananhu.
Hadzina anhu.
Hadzi na anhu.
Okay.
Hadzi.
Pues okay. Guahunai. Guaha question. Hadzina anhu. Opi.
Opi?
Opi. Hadzina anhu.
Hadzi.
Hey, repeat it. Opi. Opi. Na anmu siba.
Na an.
Mo.
Mo. Sibab.
Na anmu sibab.
Na amu sibab.
Na anmu sibab.
Na anmu sibab.
Hadzina anhu.
Na anmu sibab.
Yeah, okay. Gostungo finutimor. Malati how Jose. Gostungo finutimor. That's how you teach somebody.
I'm perspiring.
Yeah, but you don't stop and analyze. You don't think about it. You just develop those habits. And after the first lesson, you know that opi means answer.
Answer.
And repeati means repeat. And you build on that. You don't use English at all. And you don't say, this is what this means in tomorrow, etc. So you keep working on that. And once a person gets over the original shock that he's not going to think his way through this, he's just going to perform his way through it, the learning can come pretty quickly. So if you have someone around who will do this with you, tomorrow. Yeah. So that's what these marshals do. They understand how to go about doing this. And they wear some kind of a badge, maybe a golden Lottie stone or something like that. And they present themselves, and we do an ad camp. We get the government the hell out of it. We send Hope Cristobal to Rhoda or Hollywood maybe. Abolish that whole commission, right? And we put these marshals around in various places on the island because there are people who would like to learn but can't get off the dime, don't even know where to start. You can't learn it from an app. You can't. I signed up for Babbel for Fin Español. You can't learn. You can't learn anything that way. But you can learn it from another person, and the skills involved are not that great. So you take a native speaker, that minimal amount of skill, identify him, and he's a little outgoing. He sees people talking. Hafide, Guahu, Sibab, Chamorro, Marshall, Ju. Ko ontongo y como lago how cuentos que fino tomorrow. Do you want to speak tomorrow? Faisen jo, sangane jo, and you build on that, and these guys will develop their own customers, their own followings. People will search them out, and you got a chance of preserving what's left of the Chamorro language. You can put Hope Cristobal in charge of a commission, and anybody who would want to try is going to get scared away. You can change the name of all the villages, which will only confuse people. Should we go back and change all the names too to conform to that new orthography? It makes no sense. So if you understand language, you understand that language is sound. It's not marks on paper. It is sound. So you want people to learn the language, and then you confuse the hell out of them with this new orthography, where you take the apostrophe and you pretend that this is a phoneme in the language called glotta. And it isn't, because it can't exist by itself. It can exist amongst other phonemes, but you can't say it in isolation. You can say haga, but you can't start a word with. It's impossible. So, all of this reviving the Chamorro language has done far more harm than good. See if I can get somebody in here just before the closing bell. Sorry, Kellis, maybe we can get you tomorrow. We got to say goodbye to our president now. Let's go, Brendan.
The Point is KUSG, Hagåtña, Guam, 93.3 FM and 104.3 HD3.
California fires kill at least 4 people in 4 days. I'm Carmen Roberts, Fox News. More wildfire death and destruction in California. The Fairview fire that broke out yesterday about 80 miles east of Los Angeles is the latest to turn deadly.
This fire continues to grow, 700 acres so far with very little containment. Sadly, 2 people lost their lives. They were killed in the blaze, and a third suffered severe burns. All 3 civilians, residents of this community. The Fairview fire began as a small brush fire, but quickly spread. At least half a dozen homes destroyed.
Fox 11's Gina Silva in the town of Hemet. And those deaths come on the heels of 2 in the Mill fire in Northern California. On Friday, firefighters found 2 women, ages 67 and 73, dead, at least 3 injured there. Wildfires have killed those people in searing heat, which is making it difficult to fight those fires and get them under control. President Biden takes another swipe at MAGA Republicans who he considers a threat to democracy.
We have to be stronger and more determined and more committed to saving American democracy than the MAGA Republicans and that guy out that door are destroying democracy. Because democracy is at stake.
The president spoke yesterday in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, 2 swing states in the midterm elections.
President Biden says MAGA is bad. Former President Trump argues MAGA is good.
He thinks making America great again is a threat to our country. No, making America great again is great for our country.
That was in Pennsylvania, sandwiched between Biden visits to the Keystone State.
And that's Fox's Peter Ducey. And Wall Street reopens this morning after taking Labor Day off. Dow futures up 218 points. America's listening to Fox News.
Get all of your favorite Fox News podcasts ad-free on Apple Podcasts with Fox News Podcasts Plus. From Trey Gowdy, the Fox News Rundown, Will Kane, Brian Kilmeade, and so much more. Go to foxnewspodcasts.com for